Hi, I'm Anton, better known as Psychic Sushi on film music, and I'll be discussing with you my approach on phrasing and improvisation in general, and how to develop a purposeful solo. This will be a run-through of the stuff that we discussed at the clinic that I held the other night, and I hope it would be of help to you guys, to help you rehash your thoughts on that occasion. But first, I would like to discuss the importance of systems. As I mentioned then, every musician has a system. A system is developed. It consists of the musical knowledge he acquired or amassed throughout his journey through music, his first listens, and his progress through his instrument, and picking up on various things through research and listening. Improvisation-wise, your musical system defines how you respond to or perform to a musical situation. We seek musical knowledge from many individuals that influence us. Like when we purchased a video or a book that discusses a particular musical genre or style, we're not only pursuing the style of that musician that we look up to, but we try to assimilate a part of that musician. And so it is imperative that we develop our own system by listening more, researching, and particularly analyzing the things that we find ourselves attracted to musically wise. It is a fulfilling goal to try to decipher another musician's musical system, and I just wanted to start off with these words because this whole video would probably be touching on my musical system, my systematic approach to soloing and phrasing. So what's a phrase? The simplest definition of what a musical phrase is it is a musical unit, or a set of organized notes or a line. I like to approach my phrases as sentences, which are tied with words. I like to think of my notes as words and my group of notes as sentences, as phrases, and organize them. Since a sentence is a tool that we use to express our thought, I like to put a lot of thought into my phrases as well, whether they are improvised or composed. And the thing with us guitar players is when we approach our phrases, we tend to forget to breathe, or we tend to cram things, which leads to very unnatural phrasing. The sad truth is, when players, they are more capable of producing natural phrases because of their confinement with the breath. The basic unit of a phrase is the motif. The motif is a recurring element, a theme in the line, and it helps listeners develop something for their ears to hold on to. It is important to have some sort of a theme in your solo, so that listeners can connect to your lines, and you can take them with you if they follow what you're playing. But how do we develop a motif? So let's say my musical phrase would be this line. That can be seen as a musical phrase, but what we want to do is develop some sort of a systematic movement within this that people can catch, could pick up on, a hook or a line if you want to say it that way. So let me start with a short motive, a theme. Read it. something and I'm letting it feed back, as opposed to just running through my scale. I'm trying to develop something. I'll go through the elements of music again so it can be clear. When I discuss melody, I won't get into the nitty-gritty of melody, but I would be focusing more on the melodic contour, the shape of the line or the direction it's at, whether my line would be going up or going down. To simplify what I'm trying to display, when I talk about harmony, I think about the relation of the notes I play to the chords in the background. And here we go. So I got 3 notes, and I will do nothing. I will keep steady on the harmony and play around with it rhythmically. 3, 4. Melodically, I'm staying. So what if I keep my melody? I keep my rhythm at a steady pulse, but I mess with my melodic direction, and I'll keep true to the harmony. Here we go. 3. I will choose a melodic direction, but I will manipulate the harmony by following the chords instead of keeping a steady melodic pulse. My dynamics all throughout. I'll mess around with the different parameters that we have available, but I would put the dynamics on the front seat. Play with different tones I can get first to give more extra spice to the solo. With the notes that you play, they could be your glissando, your staccato, or whatever technical term they have for playing smoother or harder, or the different funny techniques we have as guitar players, such as tapping and bending, or the strange noises that we have. So I will try to come up with a theme with that. to discuss with you now my approach to form and structure. Form is described as, or defined as, the organization of the musical elements in time. My basic approach to form involves the blues call and response thing. I first learned about this through the blues, through my brief study when I was a lot younger, and I expanded on it after reading a lot and noticing that music had some sort of form, like with your basic song structure. You got your verse, your chorus, then your second verse and your second chorus, and there's probably a break, a bridge or a solo, then either goes to a third verse, so on and so forth. And through my studies into writing and poetry, I had a book one time entitled Music and Poetry, and it was a comparison of literary works that influence different types of music, and they did things note for note. Like a particular poetic line would be in A, B, A, C form, where the two A's were the theme and the responses were the B and the C. And the next example was how music, a particular music like Moby Dick, a particular piece of music that was influenced by Moby Dick, had its form based on the poem or the piece of literature. So I'll go through a few examples on how I approach my structure when it comes to soloing through the backing track again. Right. So let's have something in A, B, A, C form. The A will be the theme, and the B and the C will always be a contrast to that. So here's my theme. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you hear that? Yeah. Go through it again. Simple example. And if I want to go through an A B, I would think about the direction. Let's say the melodic direction would be a contrast. My A would probably go. Use this technique sometimes to have space. 3, 4. Response. I'm leaving room, the imaginary A, and I'm coming up with my C. So I'm coming in at where the A or where the response is supposed to be. Or you could do nothing but just play themes and leave the B's and the C's empty. Go back. What can help us with contrasts is repetition, variation, but I always think of things with how I can contrast the theme, responding to it totally differently. It can be rhythmic. You may You may come up with a theme and respond to it using 8 notes. Then you may come up with use your theme again. Then respond as a C part with longer notes. It's any way you want it. Bear in mind that you've got the elements of music to mess with. Practice them at home bit by bit and come up with your own approach or how you may solo personally. For this part of the video, I'd like to discuss how to tell your story. I noticed that most of the classic guitar solos would have a story of some sort. They wouldn't be just a display of notes or technique. They would actually describe a particular event. With the clinic, I demonstrated the solo to Stairway to Heaven, how the intro was catchy, there was development throughout the solo, and the ending was important too. I think about my solo the way a writer would come up with a story. I mentioned in the clinic that I am a literature geek. I love reading lots of books, be it fiction or whatnot. And I noticed that most of my favorite writers would come up with a very effective plot. Let's consider a story plot for a second. Your story would have an intro. It would then have a journey where the characters would be developed. Then the story would contain a twist, wherein which would keep the reader interested. The thrilling part or the suspense. There would be a recovery, wherein the hero would get back on his feet or whatever. Then the ending of the book, whether the ending would be open to a sequel or whether the ending would totally finish the book. It's going to be difficult to demonstrate this on the fly, but I'll give it a shot. I'll come up with an interesting intro. Then I would develop my motif. Then I would come up with a twist, a recovery, and an ending to it. But you could always borrow from different forms as well. Should there be anything effective? I would also borrow the zen involved with swordsmanship, wherein there are 3 movements to how a samurai would attack with his sword. He would draw it, and with the draw he would strike. Then he would like flick the blood off the sword and put it back in its scabbard. That's how it would work. So let me give it a shot. Let me try the story plot thing with the solo impromptu. as jittery as I am having all these cameras focused on me, I tried to stay mindful of what I was doing, and hopefully my intro was attention grabbing, and I did give space for my motive to develop. I added a twist here and there, rhythmically and harmonically, and I tried to recover it, and I knew I was approaching an ending, so I tried to aim for that. So for a first take, you guys be the judge if I really did meet that criteria, but it's good to practice it, particularly if you're in a situation where you have to compose a solo for a particular tune. That way it would give your solo more meaning, having that kind of form, and the listeners can connect to it. If you listen to most of the solos on radio by the really good session artists, you can tell that there is a conclusion and there is an intro and a development. And as I stated with my clinic, how you begin is equally as important as how you end it. You don't want to dig a bottomless pit for yourself. If you're gonna compose a solo, make sure you know where you're heading and you know how to end it. Now we come to the most interesting part of what I discussed in the clinic. I think it was popular among you guys about where's my zen, where's my space, your zen, and what's outside. How to bring substance into your playing. Or it is important to be inspired by something. As I mentioned, there are times that as guitar players we feel empty when we solo. It's either you're going through your rut, or you feel like you're repeating the same phrases, or you're just running a bunch of notes and not really putting any content into it. I did a brief talk about channeling your influences. I have been playing since I was about 12 or 14, and I described going through my different phases. Starting off, I was a big Jimi Hendrix fan, and then throughout my guitar journey, I became a fan of Eric Johnson, Van Halen, Steve Vai, and throughout your that period where you are studying a person's system, you pick up on some of their idiosyncrasies, and you may move on to another player, but still some of that style is filed at the back of your head, and it is possible to summon that influence through your solos. Like when I'm particularly bored, and or if I find myself in a jam session and I hear people playing one particular thing, I would like to summon some of my influences. Like for example, being a Jeff Beck fan, I would put myself in a Jeff Beck mode and try to rip off some of his lines, some of his strange bends. For example, through the backing track again. Let's say I try to channel Robin Ford and then go into Jeff Beck mode. When I was a big fan of Danny Gatton, so I would pull out a lot of his country ideas when I would play. All that stuff should be in your mental filing cabinet, and it's easy to summon this stuff at will, as long as you got the focus. You could also channel from your bandmates, as I demonstrated if you in the clinic. If you hear your drummer doing an interesting a fill, or doing a catchy rhythmic thing on his cymbals, you may pick up on that and respond to it. And or you may channel from your bassist, or if you got a keyboard player, You could play off each other. You could also channel from your audience. As I described before, I read an article on the internet about a guy who suggested that you could focus on a particular chick in the audience and try to play for her. And that too would affect your playing and give some sort of substance to it. You could imagine a scene or a place, like a composition I had in the past with the band that I had, that backed me up with the clinic. I was composing a piece looking at a Japanese calendar that had cherry blossom, and I tried to feel out the different shades and colors that the scene had. You could imagine a scene, a place, or imagine a chick. That thing would affect your playing. You could also borrow from everyday objects, like what the blues guys would do. They would hear a train, and they would sing about traveling, and they would try to mimic it on the guitar, like your. The country guys get chicken picking because they tried to copy the. Tried to copy the scratching of the chicken, and you could also borrow from the human voice, which is very effective. A whimper, a cry. Try to pick that up, sonic-wise. And another thing I would like to add is also to copy other instruments. There was a period when I would listen to a lot of saxophone players, and I would hear how they would play your lines, and I would sometimes imagine myself playing a sax but not the guitar, and try to cop that stuff up particularly when I try to play over some of the jazz stuff that they call out in jams, or if I'm in the mood to play a bit of fusion and I need to breathe, I breathe my lines, inhale, exhale, and try to imagine I'm Coltrane. I mean, I know I'm not, and I can't play like him, but it's okay. Imagining yourself as your favorite sax or trumpet player helps too if you want to breathe your lines like a. So to recap the stuff that I discussed, we earlier discussed the importance of systems, which I encourage you to look into deeper in order for you to understand the inner workings of the musicians that you enjoy listening to, and to develop your own system. As I stated in the clinic, if you've got a solid system, you're untouchable. You'll find yourself in situations wherein the audience or people in the audience would compare you to another musician you're playing with, another guitar player. But if your system is solid and your personality is strong, you're untouchable because you're yourself. People would not be comparing you. It would be more of a judgment of how you can deliver the goods. I also touched on what a phrase was, the importance of having a phrase, and the importance of coming up with a motive, be it composed or be it impromptu, and how to develop your motive using the elements of music, and how we could manipulate the motive and make it more interesting through form and structure. And my approach to form and structure, which is the borrowing from poetry and other things. And we expanded on the form and structure by telling your story, borrowing the format a story would have, and how to channel your influences and how to bring more substance to your playing by thinking of other things, by mentally conditioning yourself. I hope you enjoyed the clinic that I had, and the people that have the video. I hope that this thing, the stuff I taught you or imparted or shared, would be of use to you, and more importantly, help you play better. And thank you very much.